Mr. Speaker, the whole House will join me in sending our deepest sympathy and condolences to the family and loved ones of Lance Corporal George Hooley of the Parachute Regiment, who died yesterday in Ukraine. Lance Corporal Hooley was injured in a tragic accident away from the front lines while observing Ukrainian forces testing a new defensive capability. His life was full of courage and determination. He served our country with honour and distinction around the world in the cause of freedom and democracy, including as part of the small number of British personnel in Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, I place his name on record today.
Imagine running a business for an entire decade without ever making a loss. 10 years of breaking even or turning a profit. 10 years of paying your staff decent wages, keeping up with inflation, weathering recessions, pandemics, Brexit chaos, and every other crisis thrown at you. 10 years of being exactly the kind of wealth creator that politicians love to praise in their speeches about entrepreneurship and economic growth. And then Rachel Reeves comes along with her national insurance hike, and suddenly, for the first time in a decade, you're operating at a loss. You can't give your staff their inflationary pay rises. You're looking at redundancies. You're wondering if you can even keep the doors open. And the Chancellor who did this to you is now on television telling everyone that the numbers have to add up and she's making the tough choices. Well, here's a tough choice for you, Rachel. How about not destroying the businesses that actually create the wealth you're so desperate to tax? Quick favor. If you're absolutely fed up with politicians killing British businesses while pretending they are fixing the economy, smash that subscribe button and hit the notifications bell. Over 94% of you haven't subscribed yet. It's free, takes 2 seconds, and helps us keep exposing this madness. Cheers if you've done it. Right, let's tear into this economic disaster. James Walker, the Express assistant editor, has come out swinging against Rachel Reeves and her tax war on businesses, and honestly, it's about time someone with a platform said what every business owner in Britain has been thinking. He called the national insurance increase one of the stupidest things he's ever heard of. Not misguided, not unfortunate, not regrettable, stupid. And when you look at the actual real-world impact of this policy, it's hard to argue with him. This isn't theoretical economics debated in university seminars. This isn't abstract fiscal policy discussed in think tank papers. This is businesses that have been profitable for years suddenly running at a loss because the government decided it needed more money and couldn't be bothered to find it anywhere except the pockets of employers. And Walker didn't pull his punches on the sympathy front either. I don't have much sympathy, even if she does cry, he said. Now, that might sound harsh, but let's put this in context. Rachel Reeves has made a series of decisions that are directly causing businesses to fail, workers to lose their pay rises, and the economy to stagnate. She's done this knowingly, deliberately, as a policy choice. And when the consequences of those choices become apparent, when businesses start closing and people start losing their jobs, the expectation is that we should all feel sorry for her because it's such a difficult position to be in. Absolutely not. You don't get to make decisions that destroy people's livelihoods and then claim sympathy because implementing those decisions is stressful for you. That's not how accountability works. Let's talk about the specific example Walker gave, because this is where the rubber meets the road. He knows of a business that has never done anything less than break even in its entire existence. They've run a profitable company for the last decade, through the financial crisis aftermath, through Brexit uncertainty, through a global pandemic that shut down huge swathes of the economy, through the cost of living crisis, through energy price spikes, through supply chain chaos, through everything that's been thrown at British businesses over the past 10 years, this company survived and even thrived. They paid their taxes. They employed people. They contributed to their communities. They were, in every sense, exactly what you want businesses to be. And then came the national insurance hike. And for the first time ever, they ran into a loss. Not because they made bad business decisions. Not because they expanded too quickly or took on too much debt. Not because they couldn't adapt to changing market conditions. But because the government decided to increase the tax burden on employment to such an extent that a previously profitable business model became unprofitable overnight. That's not market forces. That's not creative destruction. That's not capitalism working as intended. That's a government actively destroying value in the economy because they needed to raise revenue and couldn't think of a better way to do it than attacking businesses. And the consequences don't stop at the business owners taking a hit to their bottom line. For the first time ever, this company couldn't give their staff inflationary pay rises. Think about what that means for the workers. We're in an environment where inflation has been eating away at real wages for years. Everything costs more. Your grocery bill is higher. Your energy bills are through the roof. Your mortgage or rent has probably gone up. And just when you're hoping for a pay rise that might help you keep up with all these increased costs, your employer has to tell you that sorry, there's no money for raises this year. Not because the business is badly run. Not because you haven't worked hard. But because Rachel Reeves decided that businesses needed to pay more national insurance, and that money has to come from somewhere. So now you've got workers who are worse off, not getting the pay rises they need and deserve. You've got business owners who are stressed, watching their margins disappear and wondering how long they can keep going. And you've got an economy that's less productive, less dynamic, and less capable of generating the growth that might actually solve some of our problems. It's a lose-lose-lose situation, where the only winner is a treasury, which gets a temporary bump in revenue while destroying the tax base that's supposed to generate money in the long term. It's the economic equivalent of eating your seed corn. Sure, you're not hungry today, but good luck planting next year's crop. And James Walker is absolutely right when he warns that this isn't an isolated case. This is happening across several businesses throughout the system. We're not talking about one unfortunate example. We're talking about a pattern, a widespread impact. Businesses all over the country that were previously profitable are now struggling. Companies that were planning to expand are now in survival mode. Employers who wanted to hire more staff are now considering redundancies. This is what happens when you pile costs onto businesses without thinking about the consequences. They don't just magically absorb those costs. They can't print money. They have to make hard choices, and those choices ripple through the entire economy. And here's where it gets really infuriating. Walker points out that this is going to cause lower tax receipts. Let me say that again, because it's important. The Chancellor's big plan to raise more money by increasing national insurance is going to result in lower overall tax receipts. Why? Because businesses that are running at a loss don't pay corporation tax. Employees who don't get pay rises don't move into higher income tax brackets. Companies that can't afford to hire more staff don't generate more national insurance contributions. Economic growth that doesn't happen doesn't produce tax revenue. You can't tax your way to prosperity, especially when the taxes you're imposing are actively destroying the prosperity you're trying to tax. It's basic economics. It's so basic that you'd think someone with Rachel Reeves' background, she loves to remind everyone she's an economist, would understand it. But apparently not. Or maybe she does understand it and just doesn't care because she's got fiscal rules to meet and political pressures to manage, and the long-term health of the economy is someone else's problem. Either way, the result is the same. British businesses are being hammered by a chancellor who seems to think that wealth creators are just convenient piggy banks to be smashed whenever the government needs some extra cash. And speaking of needing extra cash, let's talk about what's coming next, because it gets worse. While businesses are still reeling from the October budget's national insurance hike, Rachel Reeves has already admitted that she's planning to hike taxes further and cut spending in the upcoming November budget. That's right, we're not done yet. The pain train is still pulling into the station, and there are more carriages to come. The Chancellor has made it clear that she's not abandoning the government's strict fiscal rules, which means she needs to plug a multi-billion-pound financial black hole, and that burden is going to fall back on hard-working families and businesses. Again, because apparently, that's the only place Labour knows how to look when they need money. Rachel Reeves went on Sky News and gave the classic politician's response to all of this. I was really clear during the general election campaign that I would always make sure the numbers add up, she said. Well, congratulations, Rachel. The numbers might add up in your spreadsheets, but out here in the real world, businesses are failing, workers aren't getting pay rises, and the economy is stagnating. So yes, technically the numbers add up, in the same way that a budget for a family that can't afford to eat properly might technically balance if you just decide not to buy food. The numbers adding up is not the same as good policy. It's not the same as economic competence. And it's certainly not the same as actually helping the people you're supposed to be serving. She went on to talk about challenges being thrown our way, geopolitical uncertainties, conflicts around the world, increased tariffs, and barriers to trade. And yes, those are all real challenges. Nobody's denying that the global economic environment is difficult. But here's the thing, you don't respond to external challenges by creating massive internal problems. You don't deal with global uncertainty by making it harder for British businesses to operate. You don't handle international trade barriers by putting up barriers to success at home. Every country faces these global challenges, but not every country responds by systematically making life harder for their own wealth creators. That's a choice. That's a deliberate policy decision, and it's a bad one. And then Reeves pulled out the trump card that Labour politicians love to play. She mentioned what happened 3 years ago when the Conservatives lost control of public finances under Liz Truss. Inflation and interest rates went through the roof. It's a political equivalent of saying, well, at least we're not as bad as that disaster. It's deflection. It's whataboutism. It's saying that because the Conservatives completely messed things up with their mini-budget fiasco, Labour should get a free pass to implement policies that might not crash the economy as spectacularly but are still fundamentally damaging to growth and prosperity. That's not a standard to be proud of. That's not a bar to aspire to. We're not quite as catastrophically incompetent as Liz Truss is not a compelling argument for your economic policies. Here's what makes this whole situation even more maddening. There are ways to raise revenue without destroying businesses. There are ways to meet fiscal rules without killing economic growth. You could close tax loopholes that allow multinational corporations to shift profits offshore. You could properly fund HMRC so they can actually collect the billions in unpaid taxes that are owed. You could reform the tax system to make it simpler and more efficient. You could invest in infrastructure and skills that actually boost productivity and create the conditions for sustainable growth.